My name is Elena Marlowe, and I am 25 years old. For most of my life, I thought being the strong one in the family was a compliment. It meant I was the one people could rely on, the one who kept the lights on, the one who never caused trouble. I didn't realize until much later that sometimes being the strong one just means everyone feels entitled to lean on you until you can't feel your own legs anymore. I didn't think that asking to celebrate my 25th birthday at my parents' house would be the start of something irreversible. I just missed the way things used to be, or at least the way I remembered them when I was younger. My aunt's laughing too loud in the kitchen. My uncle parked on the porch pretending he hated being there while secretly enjoying every second. Cousins yelling over one another like we were all trapped in some dysfunctional sitcom with no director to yell cut. I wanted one night where I could step back into that chaos and feel like it was mine again. So I offered to pay for everything: the food, the decorations, the drinks, the cake, all of it. It felt like a fair trade. They gave me the house and the people. I covered the cost. I just wanted one night where I wasn't the one holding everything together in silence. One night where I was more than the invisible scaffolding propping everyone else up. It was my idea, my invitation, my party. At least that's what I told myself on the drive over. But when I walked in, the first thing I noticed was that my sister Emma had taken the seat I always sat in. The seat at the far end of the table, with the view of the whole room. The seat everyone just knew was mine, even if no one ever said it out loud. She was already settled there, leaning back like she owned the night, one hand wrapped around a glass, the other waving as she told some animated story. People were turned toward her, eyes warm, faces open, as if she were the guest of honor. I paused for a second, thinking maybe it was a joke. Maybe someone would laugh and tell her to move, or my mom would notice me standing there and say, "Oh, Elena's here, that's her spot." But no one did. Emma saw me, flashed me a bright, camera-ready smile, and kept talking. When I finally asked, not confrontational, just confused, my mom didn't even look up from her phone. She scrolled with one thumb and muttered, "Let her have her moment. You've had enough." Those words hit harder than they should have. You've had enough. Enough what? Enough attention? Enough birthdays? Enough of a life that I built mostly on my own? I stood there staring at the side of her face, realizing she wasn't joking. I've been the one paying their electric bills for the last 3 years. I'm the one who helped Emma cover her rent when she decided to follow her dreams and quit her job with no plan beyond some vague idea of being a creative. I've never once asked for anything back. Not money, not favors, not even gratitude. I thought maybe this night would be the one thing that didn't cost me something. Apparently, I was wrong. Dinner was awkward from the start. My boyfriend Noah did his best to keep things light. He cracked a few jokes, asked my uncle about work, tried to draw my dad into a conversation about sports. When he turned to Emma, he even complimented her dress, saying the color suited her. She smiled and smoothed the fabric down, then said, "It's from the new designer line I got into. Perks of being the favorite, right?" A few people laughed. Noah didn't. I didn't either. The joke wasn't really a joke, and everyone at that table knew it. But we kept eating, pretending it was fine. That was the unspoken rule in my family. Pretend it's fine until someone breaks. It only got worse as the evening went on. Emma launched into this long monologue about a new project she was involved in. Vague startup talk, lots of buzzwords, not a lot of details. Something about being a creative director, which anyone who knew her well understood was just code for unemployed with an Instagram account. She kept tossing little barbs in my direction without saying my name. How some people try to buy happiness but never find it. How other people just have energy that draws opportunities in. Every time she said something like that, there was a small ripple of laughter. I couldn't tell if they were laughing at me or just too uncomfortable not to. Noah glanced at me a few times across the table, checking in without words. I could feel heat building in my chest, not the kind that makes you lash out, but the kind that burns slow and deep, the kind that changes you. Then came the cake. I had ordered it myself, chocolate layered, just the way I liked it when I was a kid, with simple frosting and my name written across the top. When they brought it out, Emma actually stood up and clapped her hands like a child seeing fireworks. She leaned over the table, eyes shining in the candlelight, and for a moment it looked like she believed the cake was for her. My mom smiled, really smiled, for the first time that night. She put a hand on my shoulder, and for a split second, I thought maybe she was going to push the cake toward me and say something like, "Go on, make a wish." Instead, she said, "Why don't you let Emma blow out the candles? Just for fun. She brings the energy. It's like a tradition now." There it was again. Energy, favorite, tradition. Words that sounded harmless if you weren't the one they were being used against. I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. I watched my own birthday cake slide further away from me, watched my sister lean in and take a deep breath like she was about to swallow the whole room. Everyone counted down together, laughing, cheering, phones out to record the moment. Then Emma blew out my candles. Something inside me went very, very quiet. Not numb, not empty, just still. Like the moment right before a storm finally breaks. I stood up without making a scene. My chair scraped softly against the floor, drowned out by applause. No one noticed. I walked upstairs to my old room and closed the door for what I knew, deep down, would be the last time. A few minutes later, Noah slipped in behind me. He didn't knock. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't say, "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" He just picked up his bag, handed me mine, and took my hand. We walked down the stairs together like ghosts drifting through someone else's party. No one tried to stop us. If they noticed, they pretended not to. As we drove away, my phone lit up with messages. Some people were confused. Some sounded annoyed. Others were just disappointed, but not in me, in them, in what they'd seen and in what they hadn't done. That night, I didn't sleep. Noah stayed over at my apartment. We talked until the sky started to lighten, moving in circles around the same questions. How long had it been like this? When had I signed up for this role? Why did they always assume I would keep paying, keep showing up, keep smiling while they handed my place to someone else? By morning, something in me had shifted. It wasn't just disappointment anymore, it was resolve. Quiet, sharp resolve. What they didn't know was that I had been the one paying Emma's rent all this time. $6,000 so far. Her landlord didn't even have her number, just mine. Every first of the month, the reminder came to me. Every time she posted a new photo about living her dream, it was my bank account that made sure her lights stayed on. And August was coming. I hadn't forgotten that. That night, as Noah slept, I stared at the ceiling and realized I was done. No more rent, no more covering, no more big sister generosity dressed up as duty. I picked up my phone, opened the message thread with Emma's landlord, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was going to do when his next text came through. And this time, it wouldn't be for her. August came faster than I expected. The days after my birthday bled together in a blur of awkward silence. No one reached out. Not my parents, not Emma. For 2 days, my phone stayed stubbornly quiet, as if the entire family had collectively agreed that the best response to what happened was to pretend it hadn't. Then, midweek, a text from my mom popped up like nothing had happened. "Hope you're okay. Love you." A little red heart at the end, like it was a casual check-in and not a follow-up to one of the most humiliating nights I'd had in years. I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering over the screen, then put my phone face down and never answered. It was the people I didn't expect who made me realize I hadn't imagined any of it. Aunt Rosa called. She said she'd never seen anything so twisted, that Emma strutted around like she was starring in her own reality show, and the rest of us were just props. She told me she almost walked out when my mom said I'd had enough. Then Jared, my cousin, who barely talks to anyone, called to say I had every right to leave, that he'd thought about doing the same when Emma made that crack about people trying to buy happiness. Even Uncle Pete, who never chooses sides, told me he went home early because he couldn't stomach the way everybody was pretending it was normal. Apparently, after Noah and I walked out, the air in the room shifted. The laughter turned strained. People started glancing at each other, at my empty chair, at Emma posing in front of the cake that wasn't hers. For years, our family had been dancing around an elephant in the room. That night, the elephant climbed onto the table and did a tap routine. Emma, of course, stayed completely silent. No text, no call, no apology. Instead, she posted photos from the party. Every picture centered on her. One was captioned, "Energy attracts energy." Another, "Your success is someone else's threat." The level of delusion would have been funny if it hadn't been built on my exhaustion. Then the date I'd been waiting for arrived, August 1st. Emma's landlord texted me like clockwork. You sending this month's payment? It was never her payment, always mine. He didn't have her number. The lease had been managed through me from the beginning, because that's what I do, right? I handle things. I stared at the message for a long moment. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass of my phone screen. Not this time, I typed back. She'll have to handle it herself from now on. He replied almost instantly. Are you sure? I thought about the candles on that cake. Emma's grin. My mother's voice telling me I'd had enough. I thought about the $6,000 I'd quietly bled into Emma's rent, month after month, while everyone clapped for her imaginary career. Yes, I answered. I'm sure. He said he'd let her know. I told him, good luck. Then I set my phone down and exhaled, long and shaky, like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years and only just realized it. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. An hour later, Emma texted me. One line, no greeting, no punctuation, just, what did you do? I didn't respond. The next text came faster than the last. Then my phone started buzzing with calls. Emma, then my mom, then my dad, over and over, one after another, stacking into a messy list of missed calls that made my screen look like an alarm gone wrong. Noah watched my phone vibrate across the table and asked, You okay? Yes, I said, and for the first time I almost believed it. We went out for burgers that night. I left my phone in my bag, on silent. We ate, we talked about work, we argued jokingly over fries. Every time my mind tried to drift back to Emma's messages, I pushed it forward, into the taste of the food, the sound of Noah's laugh, the quiet relief of not being responsible for someone else's crisis. The next day, Noah held up his phone at breakfast. You need to see this, he said. On Emma's story, her apartment was half empty. Boxes stacked against the wall, clothes in piles. The caption, starting over again. A sad little restart emoji tacked on the end. I almost felt something. Almost. But it wasn't guilt. It was closer to a grim kind of clarity. This was what starting over actually looked like when there wasn't someone behind you cushioning every landing. By Thursday, Aunt Rosa messaged me again. She didn't bother easing into it. Apparently, Emma had been evicted. The landlord gave her a couple of days to move out, then changed the locks. Word spread through the family like it always does, quietly, efficiently, with a mix of pity and gossip. When people started asking what happened, the cracks in Emma's story finally began to show. My cousin Zoe texted me, You were really paying her rent this whole time? Yeah, I replied, $6,000 in total. She sent back a stunned emoji, then said Emma told everyone she had a contract job in design, that she was busy with clients. She doesn't even own a laptop, I wrote back. There was a long pause after that. I imagined Zoe staring at her screen, replaying every vague explanation Emma had given about her projects, every time my parents had bragged about her creative career while carefully skimming over details. That was the first real unraveling, the moment when people stopped taking Emma's stories at face value and started connecting the dots. She hadn't just been struggling, she'd been lying, and my parents had been helping her hold the mask in place. My dad called again the night Emma moved back into my parents' house. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. His voice was tired. You know she's not strong like you are, he said. She can't handle these things the way you can. Like that explained everything. Like it was obvious I should keep carrying everyone because I could. I sat there with my phone in my hand, thinking about that sentence. Not strong like you. He said it like an excuse, not a compliment. Like being strong meant I was obligated to let them keep taking from me until I broke. That week, more relatives reached out. People who had never said a word before suddenly had stories. They told me about things I didn't know. How my parents bragged about Emma's career at family gatherings, but got strangely vague when anyone asked for specifics. How Emma borrowed money from Rosa last year and never paid it back. How my mom once told someone I didn't mind helping because I was doing well. It was becoming obvious that the mask was slipping and Emma could feel the draft. She didn't text me again, but she posted less often. Her captions turned quieter, less smug. It was like she sensed the air changing around her, the way people were starting to look at her with something other than uncritical admiration. I stayed calm. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time I wasn't rushing to fix anything. I was letting the truth do its own work. Then Aunt Linda called. She almost never calls unless someone's in the hospital or worse. She didn't bother with small talk for long. Why didn't you say anything sooner? She asked. Why did you keep paying?" I told her the truth. "I thought I was helping someone who just needed time to figure things out," I said. "I thought if I gave her soft landings, she'd eventually learn how to stand." "Soft landings," Aunt Linda repeated quietly. "Every time you gave her one, she treated it like a trampoline." Then she told me something I hadn't known. A few months back, Emma had told their side of the family she'd been offered a creative director job in another city. There'd been a going-away dinner. They'd bought her gifts. She'd cried, hugged everyone, promised to visit. Then she just didn't go. Later, she told them the company ghosted her. "She never had an offer," Aunt Linda said. "Did she?" "No," I said. "She never even applied." That was the moment the lid blew off everything. Aunt Linda went quiet on the line, and I could hear the disappointment more than any anger. It wasn't just about Emma lying. It was about how long everyone had agreed to pretend. People started confronting my parents, asking why they let Emma live like this, why they let her steal attention, money, sympathy, why they watched her hollow out my efforts and still clapped for her performances. When my parents didn't have good answers, those questions turned toward me. This time, I didn't fill the silence for them. I didn't rush to protect anyone from the truth. I just let the facts stand. Emma had been evicted. She had lied. I had stopped paying. And my parents had enabled all of it. One night, after another round of distant relatives texting, I sat at my kitchen table, the apartment quiet around me. I opened my laptop, logged into my parents' shared credit card account, the one I'd been covering for years. It was supposed to be for emergencies only. The balance for the last month blinked up at me in crisp, uncaring numbers. Nearly $1,200. Spa visits, takeout, random online purchases. My mom had bought a standing mirror that cost almost $400. For a second, I just stared at the screen, at the list of charges stacked on top of one another like a tower built out of my patience. I realized Emma wasn't the only one who'd been floating above consequences. And I also realized I was done holding everyone else up. I stared at the credit card statement until the numbers began to blur. A month's worth of indulgence disguised as necessity. Spa visits labeled as just self-care. Takeout charges stacked 3 per day, as if cooking had become an ancient myth. A $400 standing mirror my mother must have convinced herself she needed. Needed. That word rang differently now. For years, I thought they needed me, needed my help, my stability, my paycheck. But the truth was simpler and far uglier. They weren't in need. They were entitled, and entitlement has no bottom. I closed the account without warning. No text, no call, no explanation. Just one click that shut the door on years of unspoken obligation. Then I transferred all my savings into a new private account, one they couldn't access, poke into, or borrow through old saved autofill settings. It was the first time I had ever financially protected myself from my own family. The feeling was strange, somewhere between grief and relief, like finally stepping out of a burning room you hadn't realized you'd been living in. That night, my dad called again. I let it ring, then go to voicemail. Same as before. Same silence on my end. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I was doing. All he said was, "You made your point, but this is still your family." I didn't bother responding. I couldn't decide which part insulted me more, that he thought this was just a point I was making, or that he believed being family justified using me like infrastructure. 2 days later, Emma's birthday arrived. A humid Saturday that felt heavy even before the sun came up. I didn't acknowledge it. No text, no gift, no forced smile. But I knew the party was happening. The same group that showed up for my disaster of a night would be there, clinking glasses and pretending none of the last 2 weeks had detonated. I pictured them reusing the same decorations, recycling the same jokes, ignoring the same cracks in the walls. Noah and I got in the car and drove 2 hours to a lake we loved, checked into a small, quiet Airbnb, turned our phones on silent. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt untethered. We spent the day doing nothing extravagant, walking by the water, cooking dinner together, lying on the deck listening to cicadas hum like a soft warning. The sky turned gold, then purple, and I felt my body unclench inch by inch as the night wrapped around us. It was close to 10 when I finally checked my phone. My screen lit up with a violent flood of missed calls. 46 from my family. Noah had even more. I didn't answer any of them. I already knew why they were calling. Earlier that morning, before we left town, I had scheduled a message to a private group chat that included most of our relatives. No subject line, no explanation, just a clean, quiet link. That link led to a page I built myself. No commentary, no dramatic music, no attacks, just the truth. It started with a timeline of every rent payment I'd made for Emma. Screenshots, receipts, email confirmations from her landlord. $6,072, all paid by me. Then it listed texts Emma had sent me over the years, thanking me, promising she'd pay me back when her projects took off, insisting I keep it a secret so our parents wouldn't worry. But the thing that shifted the ground was the audio clip, a phone call from last year that I'd accidentally recorded. Emma was on speaker while I was driving with my cousin Jared. She was bragging to a friend about a fake job offer, branding deals, client portfolios, painting a life she wasn't living. Jared had looked at me then and whispered, "She lying?" "Yes," I'd said. "She always is." At the time, it wasn't worth confronting. But now, her voice and her lies were laid bare. Back at Emma's birthday party, the reaction hit like a storm front. They were about to light her candles when the phones buzzed simultaneously. At first, people thought it was an Amber Alert. Then they opened the link. The room went still. Emma kept smiling until she noticed everyone staring at their screens instead of at her. "What's going on?" she asked. My dad told everyone to put their phones away. My mom kept repeating, "Don't overreact, she's just upset." But the truth was louder than they were. Later, Lisa's cousin, who'd been at the party, told us people started leaving in waves. Aunt Rosa walked out before the cake was cut. Jared left laughing. Uncle Pete confronted Emma right in front of everyone, asking if anything in her new job was real. Emma didn't answer. She didn't even defend herself. And while all of that chaos was unfolding, I sat on the deck of that quiet Airbnb, watching tree branches sway over still water, feeling a peace I couldn't name. The page had analytics. I could see who clicked, who scrolled, who listened. I watched the numbers climb in real time, each name another thread pulling loose from the story my parents had woven around Emma for years. Then, 20 minutes after the party ended, I saw something unexpected. Someone logged into my old credit card portal using my dad's email. That's how I found out they had been using my name to cover their rent. Not once, for 4 months. Nearly $4,000. They had the card saved in old apps and auto-pay systems. While I was covering Emma's rent, they were quietly draining the emergency card I'd set up years ago. The betrayal landed in layers: financial, emotional, familial. A hollow kind of disbelief settled in my chest. I called the bank the next morning. I reported the charges, froze my credit, closed the account, opened a new one, moved every remaining dollar into a place no one could touch. I didn't tell a soul. I didn't need to. Instead, that night, I sent one final message to the group chat. No graphics, no angry rant, just words. "You let someone else blow out my candles. Now watch what happens when I blow out the lights. I'm not your foundation. I'm not your fallback. This was never love, it was convenience. I'm done pretending. Don't call. I've already forgiven you, but I don't owe you anything else." No one replied. And somehow, the silence that followed was the most honest sound I'd ever heard. The silence lasted longer than I expected. Days stretched out with no messages, no apologies, no frantic attempts to pull me back into the family orbit. It wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was the closest thing I'd felt in a long time. A strange, hollow quiet that made it obvious just how loud my life had been before. No one said a word. Not Emma. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not the cousins who had shown sudden courage when outrage was convenient. Even the whispers that usually traveled through the family grapevine seemed to hold their breath. It was like everyone was waiting to see what I'd do next. And the truth was, I did nothing. For once, the crisis didn't belong to me. The mess wasn't mine to clean. Slowly, updates trickled in from relatives who still had the decency to care about the truth. One morning, Aunt Linda called. There was no anger in her voice now, just exhaustion. She said Emma had gone dark on social media, deleted everything. Even her LinkedIn, which had always been built on fantasy more than fact. "Do you know what happened with the job?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," I said, "there was no job." She sighed, the kind of tired exhale that lives between frustration and resignation. "I always wondered," she whispered. "Emma never seemed to struggle, even when she wasn't working. She just floated. It didn't make sense." Floated. Yes, that was exactly the word. Emma had floated through life on the cushion of other people's sacrifices, mine most of all. But the cushion was gone now, and gravity was coming for her. Around the same time, the backlash against my parents began to build. Relatives started confronting them, not viciously, but with a sharpness they weren't used to facing. Why did you let her lie like this? Why did you enable it? Why did you let her take advantage of her sister? Why did you pretend everything was fine? My parents tried to spin it. My mom called a few relatives, insisting Emma was taking a break for her mental health. She blamed online harassment, as if the truth were a mob instead of a mirror. But no one was buying the story anymore. People had seen too much. Cousin Zoe texted me privately. I asked Emma why she let you keep paying her rent. What did she say? I typed. She said you didn't mind. That line hit harder than any accusation. You didn't mind. The easy dismissal of my sacrifices. Like my exhaustion was imaginary. Like my generosity was bottomless. Like my silence meant consent. But I had minded. I minded every time I came home from a 10-hour workday and saw an automatic transfer notification pop up on my banking app. I minded when my parents acted like Emma's fairy godparents while I played the invisible servant. I minded the night they handed my birthday to Emma like a party favor. I minded so much I had stopped breathing without realizing it, and now I was finally exhaling. In the middle of all of this unraveling, something unexpected happened. Something small, but powerful. Noah's parents invited us over for dinner. They'd heard pieces of what happened, not all the financial details, but enough to understand that my family didn't treat me with the care they should have. I walked in prepared for pity or awkward sympathy, but they didn't offer either. Instead, Noah's dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "You remind me of myself. I spent years supporting people who never once stopped to ask how I was doing." I felt something in my chest shift, like a knot loosening. Then he asked a question no one in my family had ever dared to ask. Why are you still paying for your parents' bills? I blinked, honestly caught off guard. Because I always have, I said. Since my first real job. Since they were behind on the mortgage. Since... He held up a hand gently. Yes, but what about you? What about me? Those words echoed in my mind for days. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a life where my choices weren't dictated by guilt, where my money was mine, where my quiet wasn't misread as consent. Noah's mom brought us tea and sat beside me. We're renting out a small house soon, she said. Nothing fancy, but if you two want it, you can have first pick. A fresh start. For years, I had lived in a home defined by obligation. Their needs, their comfort, their rules. The idea of a place untouched by that history felt unreal, like a mirage I wasn't sure I deserved. But when Noah reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it once, gently, I realized I did. We visited the house that weekend. A small white place with a big backyard, quiet street, sunlight pooling through every window, no ghosts in the walls, no hidden debts, no expectations waiting to ambush me. I said yes, and I didn't tell my family a thing. I packed quietly, methodically, like someone performing a ritual of unbinding. Every box I taped shut felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. There were no dramatic speeches, no confrontations, no announcements, just silence. Clean, intentional silence. By the end of the month, Noah and I were gone. A new address, a new number, a new life carved out of the ashes of an old one. Back at my parents' house, the walls were starting to creak. Emma was still jobless. The family wasn't speaking to her. My mom had taken out a small loan with a predatory interest rate. I only knew because Aunt Rosa warned me. But I didn't reach out. I wasn't heartless, I was done. Done being the net that caught everyone else's fall. Done being the thing they landed on and walked across to get where they wanted. Moving into the new place felt surreal. It wasn't about the house. It was about the silence. Real silence. Not the tense, guilt-saturated quiet I'd grown up with, where someone was always waiting for me to fix something. This was warm, uncluttered quiet, air that didn't press on my lungs. Noah flourished too. He was lighter, freer. He unpacked the last box and said, "This is what starting over looks like." For the first time, I believed him. It was strange how quickly life softened once I wasn't carrying everyone else's weight. Weeks slipped by quietly in the new house. I worked, cooked, slept, read, took walks with Noah in the evenings. I didn't check the old group chat. I didn't open my parents' messages. I didn't watch Emma's online presence crumble. I let the silence stay silent. And for the first time in years, Nothing in that silence felt like a threat. It felt like healing. Still, pain doesn't evaporate just because you stop feeding it. Grief moves differently. It walks slowly, shows up in small corners. Some mornings I miss the idea of family, not the reality of what mine had been, but the version I wished it had been. A place where someone would have noticed the way I sank into myself at that birthday table. A place where my mother might have said, "That's her seat," instead of, "She brings the energy." But longing for what never existed was just another way of giving them power. I chose to stop. One afternoon, Noah came home with groceries, humming under his breath like life had finally begun to fit around him. I helped him unload the bags, smiling at how ordinary it felt. This quiet simplicity was what I had been craving without knowing it. Then everything shifted again. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. 5 missed calls in a row. On the 6th, I answered. "Elena." My stomach tightened. It was the receptionist from my office. "Your mother is here," she said. "She's in the lobby waiting for you." The room around me tilted. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. After everything that had happened, walking into my workplace, my sanctuary, felt like the last boundary she hadn't crossed yet. I drove there in silence. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I wasn't afraid of her, but I was afraid of what her presence meant. Family doesn't show up unannounced unless they want something. She was sitting in the lobby with a coffee cup, legs neatly crossed, as if this were a casual lunch date. She smiled when she saw me, a small, fragile smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't know how else to talk to you," she said. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, arms crossed lightly, a polite distance between us. She tried small talk first, asked about the weather, asked if Noah was doing well, told me she liked my hair this way. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed, like she was trying to warm up before getting to the real script. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check, $6,000, the exact amount I had spent on Emma's rent. "Your father and we took out a loan," she said quietly. "We wanted to make things right." For a long moment, I just looked at it, a column of ink on a piece of paper that somehow felt like a lifetime of missing apologies. She held it out with both hands, like an offering, like a truce, like the answer to a question I hadn't asked. "I don't want it," I said. I handed it back. She blinked, genuinely confused. "You don't want it?" "No." It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. "Paying me back doesn't fix what happened," I said. "It doesn't undo the years you watched Emma take and never once stepped in. It doesn't erase how easily you handed my birthday to her. It doesn't change the fact that you all let me be your safety net while making me feel like a background extra in my own life." My mother's eyes watered, not with tears she meant to shed openly, but that kind of tight, contained shine people get when they're finally facing something they've spent years avoiding. "You're still our daughter," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and I forgive you." Her face shifted, surprise, hurt, confusion, all tangled together. "But forgiving you," I continued, "doesn't mean I'm coming back. It doesn't mean I owe anyone anything. I'm done carrying this. I'm done being the strong one so everyone else can be weak. I don't hate you. I just don't want to live like that anymore." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded once, small and tired, then stood. She tucked the envelope back into her purse, smoothed her hands over her skirt, and walked out of my workplace without looking back. That was the last time I saw her. A week later, I got a voicemail from Emma. She said she'd gotten a job as a part-time receptionist at a gym. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, thinner somehow. But she didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't acknowledge anything. She just said she wanted me to know. I didn't call back, not out of spite, out of understanding. Some distances aren't punishments, they're boundaries. And sometimes the only way to heal is to let people become strangers again. As for my parents, they eventually stopped trying to reach me. The old card was gone. The money had stopped flowing. I was no longer the foundation they stood on. I was no longer the person they called when something broke. I was just Elena, a woman who had asked for a seat at her own birthday dinner and walked away when it was handed to someone else. Looking back, I don't feel angry anymore. I don't feel regret. What I feel is something purer, something I hadn't tasted in a very long time. Freedom. The cycle ended the day I walked out. The peace began the day I never went back.